God is here to heal the hopeless heart and bless the broken. This is the feeding of the 5,000 in a nutshell. That day, Jesus was exhausted. He was grieving the death of his friend John the Baptist, and he needs, for lack of a better word, a minute. So he goes off on his own. Actually, the text says he withdrew. He pulled back from ministry. He gets in a boat by himself. He sails to a deserted place, just him and God. Jesus, the healer, seeking healing. But when he gets to his chosen deserted place, it's not deserted at all. All the people have found him. And as his boat draws near the shoreline and he sees thousands waiting for him, amazingly, he does not get annoyed. He doesn't even get disappointed. The text says Jesus sees them and feels compassion for them. His heart goes out to them. His plans for silent retreat go in his back pocket, and he begins healing them. He cured their sick. I start here because other Gospels put the emphasis when they tell this story on Jesus' teaching or preaching to the crowds. But Matthew says that out of his compassion, Jesus cured their sick. Now, I wonder, because this always bothers me, the crowd followed him on foot around the sea to one of the most remote places in the area. What sick could have made that kind of journey? I often talk about my friend Pete, who died a couple of years. He had MS for 12 years, and about half of that time he was in a wheelchair. Once, after we had traveled some distance to a fair of some kind, his wife Beth realized that she had forgotten to pack the front wheels of Pete's chair. So for the next several hours, instead of going home, John Pepe pushed Pete around this fairground, tipping his wheelchair back far enough for Pete's dangling legs not to drag on the ground. Now, John, of course, came home with forearms like Popeye and probably lost about 6 pounds from the heat that day. And this was just a simple country field with plenty of refreshment stands, cold drinks, and the rest. Were there John Pepys in the crowd that day who would have walked all those miles through the wilderness terrain and the arid climate, tipping a wheelchair back so the sick could make a journey? Wait, no wheelchairs. So perhaps carried them? Perhaps the blind were led over the rocky and rooted paths, if there were paths? Maybe the lepers walked behind. I don't know. It just seems to me that getting to Jesus that day, if one were physically ill, would have been nothing short of impossible. So I'd like to put forth instead the notion that Matthew is speaking of a different kind of sick. I believe the text tells us that he cured the sick, and then it tells us how. So what is this illness, the sick, that Jesus cured? The disciples actually name it first. They look around, they see that it's getting late, they see they're in a remote place, they see the needs of the people, the enormity of the crowd, and in a bit of a panic, they go to Jesus and name the situation. We have nothing, they say. In naming this, Jesus diagnoses the sick. He sees the illness. They're sick, and the sick of the crowd was their perception and their fear of scarcity, that what they had was not enough or wouldn't be enough and would eventually run out. You know, if you visit that area of the Dead Sea, even today, tour guides will warn you never go anywhere in the area without food or water. It's that dangerous to be in that climate and that terrain for any length of time without it. Now, if modern tour guides know this, surely the locals of the area in Jesus' time, who have nothing but foot travel, would have prepared for this kind of a journey by packing food and water. It just makes sense. So if they had the resources, what was the worry? They still feared scarcity. So Jesus performs a healing miracle. He invites one boy to share what he had packed, one act of generosity which starts a chain of sharing. And indeed, there was enough in the crowd that day to feed everyone. Jesus heals them of their fear of scarcity through faith in abundance. The food is multiplied, just what they had, and all are provided for. The cure for scarcity is in front of them. This is much the same sick we suffer from today. We live in a society where scarcity is the norm. We are told and believe and then grow to fear that there is just not enough to go around, that resources are limited, and that eventually we will either run out of money or food or water or breathable air. And there is scientific and socioeconomic data to back it up. It's not that there is not enough for everyone. I mean, there would be if we would employ good stewardship, planting and growing and harvesting in harmony with nature, discerning in our own personal lives the difference between needs and wants, and then helping the world change her policies and practices to work and heal the earth of her sick. But our economy and capitalism is not set up that way. So in an effort to care for ourselves, to care for our families, to ensure that we have enough, we take what we need, and actually even a little bit more than we need, because it makes us feel more protected and less fearful. The more we have stockpiled, the safer we feel. We realize that us taking too much, it will leave others with less, but we've found a way around feeling bad about that too, actually. We just create thems. And then we come up with a reason or reasons why they don't deserve what we have. Whether they don't work hard enough, or aren't the right color or gender or age, or live in the right place, or don't believe the right thing, or belong to another political party. Creating thems helps us justify our means. Some of the symptoms of our sick are marginalization, discrimination, racism, poverty, pollution, hunger, mental illness, and addiction, among others. The fear of scarcity creates competition, isolation, and polarization. Jesus invites us to be cured, puts the cure before us, and like the people on the shoreline that day, gives us that power through, with, in Christ to do it. The question is, how do we get to that level of sharing from here? Step 1, go to Romans 8. Everybody's favorite verse, right? Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. Trouble, calamity, persecution, hunger, nakedness, danger, violence, scarcity. Nothing. The Greek word for separate, do you know what it is? It means narrowing of room. Meaning there is no space between us and God. The Christ in us is one with Christ and one in Christ. We cling to that verse, especially today, especially in the face of our own sick. We cling to the thought that no matter what, cured or not of our sick, we are connected to God and God to us, that our connection is unbreakable and unshakable. And my friends, that is true. In Christ, through Christ in us, we are connected. But while it reassures, I will tell you, this verse has hit me really hard this week. especially in thinking about the cure for my sick. I know we talk about it a lot, but listen again in light of the feeding of the 5,000. Christ in us doesn't just mean that we are unable to be separated from God. Christ in us also means that nothing can separate us from the Christ in each other. We are as intrinsically connected to one another as we are to God. That is Christ in us. That's what Jesus was showing to the crowd, showing his disciples, showing us. So what? We're connected? Play it out. When I start with my inner circle, it's terrific. It's awesome. I love my family. I love being connected to them. I love being connected to my friends intrinsically. I love not being able to be separated from my church family. I also love being connected to those I enjoy helping. You know, the ones I considered in need of my help, and I get blessed through helping them. But then there's, them. The ones that we don't want to be connected to, the ones we would never even want to be associated with, much less seen with, much less connected to. Thinking about not being able to be separated from them makes us sick to our stomach. And coming up with any feelings of love or compassion, that we would even let our hearts go out to them when they are so vile and, I dare say, evil. That I would need to act in love to them and think loving thoughts of them and pray in earnest for them and their healing and their betterment. If this is part of the cure, that is strong medicine, Jesus. Yet, if truly nothing separates us from the love of God in Christ, then the Christ in us is never able to separate from others, from anyone. Which means we will not fully experience God's love unless we live as Christ lives and love as Christ loves. We share what we have, including all of our love, with all. So, I feel at this point like I need to give you some kind of a pep talk, right? That you can do it, and together we can make the world beautiful and harmonious and peaceful, kind of a speech. But I'll be honest, I need help myself. So let's go to Nelson Mandela for some timely words of wisdom. Thank you, Nelson Mandela. He says this, and he's talking about the dream for a beautiful South Africa. He says, there are two roads that lead to that goal, this beautiful land goal. Two of those roads could be named goodness and forgiveness. Two roads that lead to the goal. Two of those roads could be named goodness and forgiveness. This gives me hope, because remember last week's definition of goodness was benevolence, kindness, doing things for the other's benefit, that we are co-laborers with God to bring about goodness, agathon. This we can do. Even though our hearts might not be ready to embrace everything that goes with all the forgiveness and love to go down that forgiveness road, we can walk the path of goodness. We can do that. Perhaps acting in goodness, simply doing something good for somebody else, thinking good, praying for their good, brings about something else. Perhaps it brings about things like faith. Perhaps it will lead to compassion. Perhaps it will lead to forgiveness, even love. I find it so powerful that the very first act of Jesus' disciples after witnessing the cure, after witnessing the miracle of all being fed, what did they do? They went and collected the broken pieces. As disciples of Christ, that is our call as well, isn't it? To go and get the broken. To go even to them, because trust me, they are as broken as everybody else. To act first, not in fear of scarcity, but in faith of abundance. Acting in goodness, knowing that God has enough grace to more than provide for all of us. My friends, I ask today, just act. Do one act and see what happens. Act before love. Act before belief. Act because Christ is telling you it's the right thing to do. Act before you even realize that Christ is telling you it's the right thing to do. Jesus has given us this cure to cure our sick. Let's not let the opportunity pass us by. God bless you this morning.